The first few shaky years of anime's journey to American home video were a no man's land compared to how we consume anime today. Because the pool of translated works was so shallow, if you were into anime, you were into every anime, and you had likely seen every anime you had access to. If you couldn't get your hands on a particular series, you could at least turn to fanzines and otaku magazines, which contained detailed episode summaries, sometimes of shows that weren't even officially translated yet. Just about everyone in the early scene was connected in some way once the internet came around, with Usenet group Rec Arts Anime becoming a hotbed for the sharing and celebration of a brand new culture. It's from this early 90s scene that amongst boomer anime enthusiasts and old heads alike, there goes a sort of folk tale about an anime that was too hot for Western shores. One whose English language version was canned mere weeks before its release, following a news frenzy at the inaugural AnimeCon 91. Some swear by this story, while others insist a game of telephone has blown it far out of proportion. As the 30th anniversary of this controversy is upon us nearly day and date, it's the perfect time to shed light on this tale of lost media, mixed signaling, newsgroup beef, anti-free speech watchdog groups, and an infamous pair of pink panties. I'm here to present to you the truth of Minna Agechao, the unreleased anime that almost changed history. According to most, the story goes that in 1991, Central Park Media's then brand new anime label, US Manga Corps, was gearing up to release a raunchy adult OVA as its first ever title that was shot out of the sun after some targeted bad press from Fox News landed it in hot water with conservative Christian parents groups. That bad press, as it's told, centered largely around the release being sold with promotional pink panties. This caused Central Park Media to pull the plug on the release, and its first title would go on to be Dominion Tank Police. However, a counter-narrative has emerged. Some claim the panties were totally made up, and that there couldn't have been a Fox News piece on the anime because Fox News didn't exist yet. Furthermore, some insist the anime wasn't remotely pornographic at all, that it was at most on par with anime like Urusei Yatsura, which was broadcast on cable in its native country. With such conflicting accounts, I knew my only option was to cut past modern-day accounts of what transpired and delve straight into the archived annals of Usenet newsgroups, magazines, catalogs, press releases, and convention footage. But first, I knew I needed to watch the OVA for myself. Minna Agechao, whose name is sometimes translated as "I'm all yours," I'll do it with anyone, everybody's doing it, and, as was the title given to it by US Manga Corps, I Give My All, was a 1987 OVA based on a 19-volume seinen manga of the same name, roughly adapting and condensing the manga's plot into just 45 minutes. The anime follows the romantic growing pains of freshly graduated Chikanaka Rokuro and his new girlfriend, the idiosyncratic Mamiya Yuno. It begins with a group of girls spying on Rokuro in his gross little neat den as he, oh wow. This OVA really opens with our protagonist accidentally busting in his own face. All right, let's go. Yuno is inexplicably charmed by this show of unabashed Kumarism and introduces herself to him, immediately offering to become his girlfriend. As though that wasn't telling, it quickly becomes clear she's not normal. She's brash and reactive, at one point huffing exhaust when she thinks Rokuro isn't truly committed to her. Foids, am I right, ladies? She also doesn't know a lot of common public space etiquette, as seen when she fails to use a bathhouse properly, angering the other customers and getting the duo kicked out. Despite her lack of street smarts, she's incredibly intelligent and just unrelentingly horny, both of which we see in a pretty bewildering scene where she jacks Doink in front of Rokuro while reciting an array of important dates in world history. This is all because Yuno comes from a very rich family, one that's exponentially crazier than she is. It's at this point that what at first seems like typical otaku fantasy fulfillment becomes a variation on the Romeo and Juliet story centered on Yuno's quest to bust a nut. This plays out in increasingly ridiculous ways, from Yuno going through a rigorous Kegels routine in a dungeon, to Rokuro entering a one-man standoff with the Mamiya family's private army to prove his love is pure. In the end, Yuno is able to bust right as her family dumps a mountain of yen on their apartment so massive it levels the building, a signal of their approval. Of all the sex and nudity that goes on in Minna Agechao, only one scene is played straight, and even in that instance, it's exactly as plot relevant and non-explicit as what you'd get out of any theatrical R-rated film. Let's just say that, for my next video, I have watched a good bit of hentai over the past few weeks, from a purely anthropological perspective. And the cavernous gap in framing is obvious. Though it's most certainly explicit, it would be laughable to call Minna Agechao pornographic. It's a comedy first and foremost. Like, it's difficult not to laugh at how exaggerated this all is. Everything is cranked so high. It's an effective comedy too. Minna Agechao is genuinely funny as long as you're okay with laughing at some truly heinous shit. It's one of those pieces of media where a full written summary makes it sound horrible and objectionable, but within its tone it's obvious it's got zero interest in taking itself seriously, so it comes down to how seriously or not you're comfortable taking it. I wouldn't say it comes recommended, but I watched it a good handful of times in preparation for this video, and on each watch enjoyed its brisk pacing, over-the-top humor, and expressive animation. I also found the romance pretty endearing. On my first viewing, I practically cheered when Yuno finally got to bust. It's not often you see this kind of media center around the female orgasm, so props to that. The term love comedy refers pretty broadly to Japanese romantic comedies, but generally these take a more slapstick comedic approach than what we tend to think of as the archetypical dialogue-focused rom-com. This too is what differentiates the sex comedy from straightforwardly erotic titles. Despite the order of words in the phrase, the comedy comes first. For example, the aforementioned Urusei Yatsura in its heyday was by all accounts a sex comedy, given its occasional casual nudity and its orbiting of romances while centering very few of its episodes on its romance. Minna Agechao fits within this genre in ways that are hopefully clear now. The rumors that it was super explicit aren't necessarily true, but neither are those that state it wasn't at all. For some more context on the OVA, I skimmed much of the untranslated manga it's based on, only to find the anime was a good bit more tame. You see a lot more of the action here, where in the OVA it's almost all under the sheets. This is about what I expected, of course, but it further solidified that Minna Agechao just wouldn't fit in the section of video stores you have to go through a curtain to enter. While I was at it, I read through what I could find translated from author Hikaru Yuzuki's body of work, and came out the other side pretty charmed by the guy. His art style walks a delicate balance between expressive cartooning and delicate illustration. It makes sense that he briefly worked on a shoujo manga in the late 70s. He definitely slots in with dudes like Hisashi Eguchi in my mind, whose work centers primarily on pretty women having a good time. Plus, it's pretty clear he has it tight. Authoritative, manic women with short, coiffed hair. Good taste. I'd like to see more of his works translated, but his art stands on its own for being infectiously fun, which would explain why he's actually done a good amount of illustration and character design work for video games. He did the box art for the FM Towns port of Zack McCracken, there was an LCD game based on one of his manga, and he worked as the character designer for a tragically still untranslated left-field little Super Famicom RPG, Love Quest. If that sounds familiar, by the way, it's probably because a prototype of the original unfinished non-Super Famicom version was discovered but not dumped a few years ago, presumably remaining in the hands of a private collector, leaving yet one more piece of lost media associated with Yuzuki's artistic ventures. With its initial presence on the Famicom, this probably makes it one of the first JRPGs without traditional combat. Yeah, the battle screens are the protagonist trying to woo various women. I want to play it. Okay, enough preamble. Let's get into this shit proper. Here is what really happened to Minna Agechao. On August 1st, 1991, AnimeCon chairman Mike Tatsugawa announces the brand new anime distribution company US Manga Corps will be distributing Minna Agechao, stating that it may appear in 16mm at the end of the month during the very first AnimeCon. He states that, based on a press release he saw, the first 1,000 copies will include a, quote, souvenir panty. A few days later, Animego's Michael House states he and the boys just finished mastering the subtitled VHS, with a current planned release of October 23rd, just about 2.5 months after its announcement. This marks Minna Agechao as US Manga Corps' first tape release, with Dominion Tank Police as their second, Project Echo as their third. Flash forward to the 29th, the day before AnimeCon 91, a now infamous, deeply inflammatory LA Times article would be published about Minna Agechao, featuring quotes from phone interviews with US Manga Corps' John O'Donnell, focus on the family's Robert DeMoss, and cartoonist Ralph Bakshi. Here's a summary of the most important parts. The article opens with the phrase, "Cartoons are not just for kids," which is the anime equivalent of, "Games have come a long way since Pac-Man." Amidst its gawking at Minna Agechao's very existence, it seemingly invents numerous sensationalized, flat-out false statistics about Japan's anime and manga industry, including that, quote, in Tokyo, more than 200 serialized comic magazines, 1/3 of which specialize in pornography, sadomasochistic sex, and violence, hit the newsstands every week. Ralph Bakshi says he's disturbed by hentai. The reporter comments that the first 2,000 copies, shipped in their original packaging with an advisory sticker reading "Not for Children," will include a, quote, promotional pink panty insert. Most importantly, following a quote from O'Donnell insisting that the release is unlikely to come under attack by any Southern Baptist types, the article states that Minna Agechao has, in fact, quote, already come under attack by Focus on the Family, a Colorado Springs-based Christian media watchdog group, who claim they intend to pay close attention to what happens with this video. August 30th, the first day of AnimeCon 91, is by all accounts a success. The event, which was just the 4th American anime convention, became the first ever to break 1,000 attendees. That same day, San Jose's Mercury News publishes their own article about AnimeCon that similarly hones in on Minna Agechao. If the turnout at AnimeCon, a convention for fans of Japanese animation, is an indication, Americans will soon be watching animated couples do what comes naturally. And we're not talking about Elmer Fudd chasing Bugs Bunny either. Though not nearly as incendiary, the article confusingly speaks more on Minna Agechao than the event itself, despite closing with information about the convention's location, phone number, pricing, etc. Minna Agechao would screen twice at AnimeCon, both times on an unsubbed laserdisc, not the 16mm print like Tatsugawa and House had hoped for. It's worth noting that, despite being produced for the home video market, a raw 16mm version of the OVA did see play at a few small theaters in Japan at the time of its release in '87, bizarrely alongside the Megami Tensei OVA. Atop being radically different in tone, these OVAs weren't even owned by the same company. It's very strange. In addition to the Laserdisc screenings, it was playing in subtitled tape form at both the Animego and US Manga Corps tables in the dealer's hall. While a surprising amount of footage from the event is freely accessible online, I was only able to find a single photo of the dealer's hall, and without either booth in frame. Love that dude's lum drip though. At these tables, advanced orders were taken for both Minna Agechao and Dominion Tank Police. On the third day of AnimeCon, a Rec Arts anime user recounts seeing a story on E! Entertainment about a, quote, softcore anime film being screened at AnimeCon that's causing a bit of a stir. While I couldn't find this broadcast, research proved that it very well could have been real, despite my never hearing about it in modern recollections of this debacle. See, September 1st, 1991 would have been the date of E! News' first fucking broadcast ever. E! News, by all accounts, debuted on September 1st, 1991, meaning that, if this is true, the program's first ever episode would have contained a segment about anime tits. God bless America, I want this to be true so bad. Over the following weeks, the aftermath of these articles and news spots are discussed back on the Usenet news group. Reactions range from threatening to boycott US Manga Corps to writing letters and petitions to both the LA Times and the San Jose Mercury. The main consensus amidst all the noise is that users are frustrated with how anime is already being pigeonholed as gratuitous and graphic, and that US Manga Corps, who has been at the dead center of this controversy, is willfully perpetuating this mindset. Members who had been interviewed by these outlets would speak to how their journalists were nearly singularly focused on hearing more about the animated pornography being shown at the event. For example, comic artist and staple of the 90s anime community Lee Hernandez would later speak on how she was being bombarded by the interviewer with questions about anime's violence and sexual content that attempted to trap her into confirming their obvious bias, no matter how she answered. One user recounts that, while working registration for the convention, they checked in a reporter from Entertainment Weekly, although it appears that if this is true, they never published a story on the event, as I couldn't find any evidence of one. It's also possible they were mistaking E! News for Entertainment Weekly. It's within one of these threads that a user mentions the legendary Fox Network late-night video show report on the event. But how is that even possible? Fox News wasn't established until '96. It's right there in the name. It wasn't Fox News, it was an affiliate broadcasting on a local Fox station. Years later, an Anime News Network forum user would corroborate. The news report was real, it was a local Fox affiliate, and it was exactly what you'd expect. A local news reporter looking for a freak show and taking the usual, "can you believe this nonsense?" attitude. I used to have a copy of the darn thing that I snagged from the CPM offices, but lost it a long time ago. The report followed the usual format of someone reporting from a fan event. The anchor talks about racy cartoons coming from Japan with an over-the-shoulder graphic of the girl from Minna Agechao in the throes of passion, a Japanese flag serving as the blanket over her. I think the text on it was erotic import. It ends with the reporter showing the little paper panties and saying, "So, sex scenes of Japanese cartoon characters, with English subtitles. Now, really, would you buy that?" We then get a few inserts of man on the street sections at the AX92 dealer's room, and a few people saying they would. I was very skeptical about this post, especially considering its misattribution to Anime Expo 92, until I realized who this forum user was: old guard anime and game translator Neil Nadelman. I imagine some of his details are just fuzzy. I fully believe it exists. For those keeping score, that marks at least 4 pieces of confirmed lost media surrounding Minna Agechao so far. The 16mm print, the official English subtitles, the Fox affiliate report, and the Famicom prototype of Love Quest. Here's where things get really confusing for a bit. In one of these threads, Mike Tatsugawa alludes to Carson City, California, putting out an investigation into bookstore chain Books Nippon on suspicions they were proliferating, let's just say, illegal pornography. He attributes this as being a direct result of the LA Times article, despite the article not mentioning or even implying any illegality about anything. For a bit more context, Books Nippon was owned by Japan's largest book wholesaler and sold both English translated and original text copies of an array of East Asian books and comics. Think of them as a very small version of your modern-day Kinokuniya. One of Books Nippon's divisions was US Renditions, which was the very first company to officially produce direct-to-video subtitled anime in the States, and in US Manga Corps' earliest days, they aided US Renditions in distribution. I have scoured for information on this supposed investigation, but have come up completely empty-handed as to any sources nor mere rumors that corroborate even so much as a knock on Books Nippon's door. From here, I can only posit a few hypotheses, but take these with a few fistfuls of salt each. So, in the early 90s, parents groups in Japan were making a massive stink about all of the so-called harmful manga being sold in commonplace storefronts, pushing hard for legislation that would mark them unfit for sale in most major retailers. In response, manga publishers and wholesalers began self-moderating ESRB style, marking some books as adult only. Initially, I suspected that there was some form of communication breakdown or game of telephone between Japanese and American distributors that landed Books Nippon in hot water, since they were fully owned by a Japanese company, but there's zero evidence to corroborate a connection there. I also found rumors about manga 1 + 2 = Paradise being apprehended by customs on similar claims. This manga was pretty infamous in Japan, with backlash surrounding its status as one of many harmful manga, leading Kodansha to cancel it despite its decent fan base, supposedly of both men and women. For the sake of being thorough, I skimmed through a volume of 1-2 Paradise. It's fucking deranged. Some of the most brazen, joyous bimbo-core twink torture I've come across. A full embrace of all things tacky. It is fake nails given ecchi manga form. It's unrelenting. All these girls do is toy endlessly with the poor little gynaphobe protagonist. It was written by a woman, too. I kind of can't believe this thing exists. All I can do is marvel at the fact that I'm seeing art this explicit with furigana attached to it. Regardless, there was no corroboration here either, and it's possible the alleged snafu at customs took place in Canada, where obscenity laws are tighter. In all my research, I couldn't find proof of Books Nippon running into any legal trouble, much less any connection to the LA Times article or US Manga Corps. To me, this reads as Tatsugawa's frustrations with US Manga Corps' conduct at AnimeCon boiling over into unrelated territories. Upon thinking about it a bit more as I'm editing, it is possible that Focus on the Family put in a call to the police department, but for reasons I'll get into later, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. That's the only other reason I can think of. Back on track, as discourse heightens and criticisms of US Manga Corps grow so frenzied that a sect of newsgroup posters are demanding they be banned from next year's convention, Animego's Michael House takes to the podium once more to share his 2 cents in an attempt to defuse things. Every time I saw Minna Agecha that weekend, I saw plenty of people watching it, men and women, young and old alike. They were all laughing at it, which is the point. At least once, I heard John O'Donnell, president of CPM, ask a sizable audience at his booth, roughly 20 people on average, male and female alike, "Is anyone here offended by this?" Without exception, the audience replied negatively. Representative comments were, "No, this is funny. What is there to be offended at?" Something about this quote is quite telling. Maybe you picked up on it too. It's at this point that rumors begin to spread that every copy of Minna Agecha had been purchased by a private fan, including those that had been pre-ordered by AnimeCon attendees. What the fuck, dog? Every copy? Is that possible? Was this some Rosalina amiibo shit? These rumors were coming from reputable members of the community, too. This wasn't just pulled out of thin air. Thankfully, Animego's other key figure, Robert Woodhead, joins the conversation on September 22nd, having just returned from meeting with the head of US Manga Corps. Because the video generated so much attention, a third party approached CPM and bought out the entire special collector's edition of Minna Agecha, the original packaging plus the infamous pink panties. Central Park Media will not be releasing a regular edition until the collector's edition has been marketed. How and when this will occur hasn't been finalized. So, a third party bought every copy of this quote-unquote collector's edition, so they won't be going to market, but a future regular edition isn't allowed to go to market until the collector's edition goes to the market, even though the collector's edition can't go to market because the entire stock was purchased by a third party. This shit isn't even adding up a little bit. In October of '91, we finally get clarity on what truly happened. The third party was Sony, of course. Following the rush of attention from the press, Sony got cold feet and asked to cancel the English language release altogether, buying back every copy to compensate US Manga Corps for the production costs. Folks who pre-ordered the OVA got a free tape, a letter of apology, and a $10 coupon as a sorry, and all was well, with Dominion Tank Police going on to be their true first release. The following year, at an Anime Expo 92 panel, when asked if Minna Agechao could get a release once the dust has fully settled, US Manga Corps responded with a resounding no. This conclusion leaves and raises quite the handful of good questions, and admittedly, this is where my own deductive reasoning takes charge. But after reviewing, re-reviewing, checking, double-checking, reading, rereading, and stewing on all the evidence at my disposal, I've come to the most coherent conclusion I possibly can that I believe thoroughly answers everything. At the end of the day, there weren't too many stories about Minna Agechao. There were 2 local articles, a local TV news report, and maybe an E! Entertainment spot that didn't even leave enough impact to be discussed in more than one single Usenet post. This wasn't national news, much less international. What scared Sony Music Entertainment Japan so bad about this? Sony was having a pretty good year in '91.
The Nintendo PlayStation
was announced in June. Surely that would go great. Okay, but seriously, they saw a 25% increase in net sales, and assuredly saw the writing on the wall that the next few years would mark a national recession, following the burst of Japan's infamous technological bubble economy, knowing they'd need to play it safe and stay in as many good graces as possible. In '88, while the economy was still good, Smej bought Columbia Records, and it wasn't until '91 that they changed the CBS Records name to Sony Music Entertainment internationally. That was, of course, the same year a controversial little anime tape was to be released in its original sleeve, brandishing the Sony name and the Sony name only right on the front. Again, note the multiple quotes mentioning the tape would be released in its original packaging, Japanese text and all. In later official statements, potential confusion over the packaging would be one of the main reasons cited for Minna Agechao's cancellation. Let's look again at that quote from Christian media watchdog group Focus on the Family. We intend to pay close attention to what happens with this video. I think this is the exact line that sealed the tape's fate. Focus on the Family and watchdog groups in general all benefit from prolonged controversy. It gets their message out, and more often than not frames them as the good guys warring against a deviant mainstream. It doesn't in any way benefit Sony, though, who was caught in the crossfire over something that was never even an issue in their home country. Furthermore, I'm willing to bet the Focus on the Family would have made anime into a bit of a boogeyman if just one adult animation proved fruitful for media exposure. Sony clearly saw promise in the American anime market, but knew it had to grow under as few attacks from ignorant third parties as possible. This in itself raises 2 questions. How did Focus on the Family even find out about this release? And why was it going to be released in its original packaging when unsubbed tapes were already sold in their original packaging alongside what few otherwise clearly delineated localized tapes existed? That'd just be confusing. Who browsing for subtitled tapes would even think to look at Minna Agechao when the only lick of English on the cover is Sony's name? All this can be answered the same way, with an explanation I've not seen anyone theorize, but that makes perfect sense with all of the accumulated evidence. This was a rush job. I was able to find US Manga Corps' very first press release from way back in May of '91, as debuted in Video Business magazine, and it announced that their first title would be Dominion Tank Police. Zero mention at all of Minna Agechao. On the vague recollection of a MyAnimeList user, I spent actual hours combing through scans of previews catalogs and various Western otaku magazines for advertisements, listings, or promos on Minna Agechao. I even bought up a handful that, based on the months they released in, would theoretically contain ads for the OVA, and I found nothing. Previews Magazine, August 1991, cataloging media for release in October, the exact same time frame from Minna Agechao's announcement to potential release. Nothing. The Animego section lists releases for other distributors, and not even a whiff of the damn thing. This is true back on Recart's anime too. There are multiple posts about US Manga Corps' formation and upcoming release of Dominion Tank Police from well before when Tatsugawa teases Minna Agechao. Let's compare Dominion's release against Agechao's. Dominion had 6 months of lead up from its announcement to its release, and when it did release, it had an original sleeve all in English. Minna Agechao had just 2.5, being announced at the same time the subtitles had been mastered, and barely a month before it would be screened and pre-sold to audiences at AnimeCon. It was to be sold in its original Japanese packaging. But what about the pink panty insert, you may ask? That had to have been an addition on US Manga Corps' part, right? Nope. It was in the Japanese release all along. Here's a picture. They've even got lyrics from the OVA's vocal theme in there. That means US Manga Corps spun this detail into a promotional bonus. That this was a collector's edition with a regular edition following suit if sales proved fruitful. No wonder they never explicitly specified the panties were paper. This is completely in line with US Manga Corps' marketing strategies, which were across the board more aggressive and even opportunistic than the other Western anime distributors from the era. Take, for example, this ad in the November-December issue of Protoculture Addicts. Tired of poor quality third-hand anime dubs with lousy subtitles or none at all in horrible packaging? The irony here is self-evident. This ad, as did many of their ads and press releases, leaned into the edgier elements their anime contained. Like, for fuck's sake, the first 3 words of their description of Dominion Tank Police are sexy cat sisters. Mike Tatsugawa had repeatedly said he had heard from other dealers that US Manga Corps hired a press guy who made individual phone calls to all the same outlets AnimeCon's press release went out to. One who, we can only assume, assuredly stressed these same racy elements in each and every phone call. The way I see it, Minna Agechao's American distribution was proposed between Sony Music Entertainment Japan and US Manga Corps sometime after their initial debut, and after deciding it was technically possible, hastily set things up so that it could be released shortly after AnimeCon. Without time to make a new sleeve, they decided to use the original, including the panty insert, and without time to put in sufficient advertisement, they attempted to make their own guerrilla marketing style by diverting AnimeCon's press, stirring up controversy with the local papers. Let's take a look at that quote from Michael House again. At least once I heard John O'Donnell, president of CPM, ask a sizable audience at his booth, roughly 20 people on average, male and female alike, "Is anyone here offended by this?" This is frankly kind of genius, if completely scummy. Like, all of the press releases about AnimeCon talked about Minna Agechao as its centerpiece. Usenet posters joked it seemed like Minna Agechao was the only anime journalists saw. Look at how many industry legends guested there. The goddamn founder of Gainax and the dude who made Akira were both there, but absolutely no press about them because artistry doesn't sell papers. Weirdo anime perverts beating off together in a sweaty convention space does. Consider also Neil Nadelman's comment in that ANN forum post. He had taken a copy from the CPM headquarters. If they knew to tape that broadcast, they knew it was coming. This all backfired when the LA Times called John O'Donnell's bluff about the Southern Baptists and personally sent their review copy to the Pomona branch of Focus on the Family, as confirmed by Robert Woodhead. Pomona, by the way, is 6 hours from AnimeCon. There's no way they would have found out about this thing organically. As if any more evidence was needed, hentai anime had been released in the States up to this point already from Excalibur Films under names like Gonad the Barbarian and Offenders of the Universe. The fact that these far more risque titles were virtually unknown by Focus on the Family even further suggests that they were made personally aware. For US Manga Corps, a feud with a Christian watchdog group would have been a dream come true, but for anime fans, for anime, and for Sony, a company from a culture where all press is not good press, not so much, so it got shit-canned. To smooth over relations, though, Sony licensed Dog Soldier to US Manga Corps for basically nothing, so there's that. Dog Soldier is, for reference, one of the first examples of a bad anime getting localized stateside. The media response to Minna Agechao is one we still see today, a sensationalized view of Japanese culture and art that panders to xenophobic, self-righteous views on the world outside of the United States. A scramble to justify impulsive repulsion to that which is not immediately understood, rather than to reflect on it. I don't doubt for a second that Central Park Media operated out of passion for East Asian cinema, but their willingness to pander to this novelty first, artistry second, gawking fascination with Japanese animation is nonetheless disappointing. With all this in mind, it makes sense Tatsugawa would so persistently, openly vent his frustrations with US Manga Corps. While the event was a massive internal success, he knew he'd have to do triple duty to ensure the press would have no choice but to come away with a better, more accurate view of Japanese animation come time for Anime Expo 92. We've learned from last year's mistakes, and one of the key things that I'm going to try to do this year is have the SPJA give an alternative perspective to the media. We've got newspaper, magazine, and radio spots lining up, and hopefully we can counteract this image. Instead of discussing I Give My All or Wandering Kid, we should discuss Lapita, Kimba, Speed Racer, and Astro Boy. Images that the American public are already familiar with that are clearly incompatible with the images that the press creates today. By the tail end of 92, the controversy surrounding Minna Agechao was already being mystified. We see users confusedly talk about the panty inserts as though they were real underwear. Some claim they'd heard the OVA was constantly playing all over the con, and it's repeatedly lumped in with other controversial but far more explicit anime outings, such as Cream Lemon and Orotsuki Doji, the latter of which would go on to be released by Central Park Media under its Anime 18 line. Already, we see the seeds planted for what would grow into the legend of the battle between Minna Agechao's pink promotional panties and the conservative Christian conglomerate. It's at this point I'd like to tie everything together with a brief story about a similar controversy that had far wider ripples than that of Minna Agechao's. In 1968, within the pages of the very first issue of Weekly Shonen Jump, debuted a series by the name of Harenchi Gakuen, written by a struggling 23-year-old manga artist named Go Nagai. More than 50 years removed, the manga in isolation is no more than a curiosity removed from its landmark status as the title that broke Nagai into the mainstream. It centers on, as the name suggests, a shameless school where everyone's a pervert. Boys peep, girls flash their underwear, teachers make moves on one another, all in comedic fashion. Nagai has said it was inspired by a time he saw a group of schoolboys looking at a porno magazine together, in awe of its contents. Beyond his signature layer of sardonicism lies a pathos that views these things as somewhat playful and innocent, if twisted. I don't really know that I see what he's going for, but I respect it. I respect it for a few reasons. First of all, this is what many consider to be the first sex comedy that wasn't a live-action film, no doubt a blueprint for works like Urusei Yatsura and Minna Agechao alike to iterate on. Of course, it isn't exactly easy to be the first of your kind, much less when you're quite literally pushing the boundaries of what the world thought was even acceptable for the medium. Yes, PTAs, women's groups, and politicians alike railed against this thing for all 4 years of its run, in some instances getting issues of Jump pulled from sale temporarily in some regions. This didn't result in its cancellation, though, as some insist. No, Weekly Shonen Jump editorial saw all this outcry as a success, proof they were, from a business perspective, doing something right. However, all this attention was being cast directly onto Nagai, and some nasty hit pieces began circulating about him. A quote from the man himself. I was bombarded with interview requests from newspapers, magazines, and TV. Eventually, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm taking all my art and I'm going into hiding. I'd taken a plane somewhere far away, but when I got off, the TV cameras were right there. I wonder how they even knew where I was going. I was branded a nuisance, an enemy of society even, in spite of the fact that what I'd done wasn't any big deal. I would watch movies and things and had a very clear sense about not crossing the line, about what I could do and shouldn't do to make sure the police would never show up at my door. One such rumor, in an attempt to further prove his perversion and absence of morals, stated he was going to gay bars every night. He wasn't. He was writing 4 separate manga. Dude probably didn't even have time to sleep. Nagai was in a tough position where he knew ending his series inconclusively would be a win for these conservative pro-censorship groups, but in all the attacks on his character and the incessance of the spotlight, his passion had drifted elsewhere to what he knew would be his magnum opus, Devilman. So he concocted a truly brilliant artistic escape plan. The final leg of Harenchi Gakuen saw a sudden pivot to an all-out war between the titular school and parodies of the conservative parents groups lashing out against the manga, ending in the school's defeat with the entire cast dead. With no cast for the series to continue on with, Jump had to let Harenchi Gakuen end as a record to the mangaka's war with the prudent mass media. Nagai would go on to have one of the most prolific and revolutionary artistic careers in the history of comics. When I say I have respect for Harenchi Gakuen, it's not out of reverence for any deftness of artistry, nor anything especially profound within its text. I have respect for it in the way I have respect for most any piece of art that has ever challenged the traditionalist status quo or made those in charge uncomfortable, and has stuck to its guns through and through. Say what you will about the content of manga like Harenchi Gakuen, Minna Agechao, and even 1-2 Paradise, but by all accounts, nobody was hurt in their creation. They are pure fiction, brought to life by singular creators who operated with singular visions. That alone should be enough to justify their existence. It should hopefully be clear to anybody paying attention that cries for censorship in art, for a codified rule set of what is and isn't on the table to depict, almost always align in some way with the same kind of conservative values that insist sex is bad, and that violent video games are a more vital threat to America than the ease by which a bystander can acquire a firearm. Values that will almost always let slip fundamental bigotry beneath their words when pressed hard enough, and that any form of hardline legislature or regulations for art are invariably going to be used to silence or de-incentivize legitimate forms of self-expression. Yes, even ones you agree with. If you're in the States, there's a chance you've actually heard about Focus on the Family before this video, because in 2005, they famously attacked butt-fucking SpongeBob SquarePants for promoting dangerous homosexual lifestyles because of his appearance in a music video meant to encourage unity amongst literal children. I hope if there's one thing we, as the endlessly diverse products of a mass culture of internet anime enjoyers, can all agree on, something that crosses all ideological barriers, that transcends all manner of political minutiae, no matter your age, where you live, nor to whom, if any, you pray to, be you a stan, a chan, or a tran, it is, with the power of God and anime on our side. Man, fuck Christian watchdog groups. Mike Tatsugawa actually did a panel for Anime Expo 21 in celebration of AnimeCon's 30th birthday that's going public around the same time as this video. And while I'm fairly certain the amount of Usenet beef intrinsic to this story will mean we won't hear more than a vague allusion to Minna Agechao, I'm hopeful the panel will at least debut some new footage or images from the event, hopefully even just a blurry shot of a CRT displaying the subtitled version. With all the emphasis Rec Arts Anime put on the infamous panties, I almost wonder if they were part of the US Manga Corps booth or something, like a giant pink foam board display. While I'm glad I was able to find photo evidence of these inserts, I was really disappointed there wasn't actual cloth underwear. Or so I thought. See, during the research phase of this video, I took a gamble on a successful lowball eBay offer and snagged what I thought was an art book from Minna Agechao. Turns out it's a full promotional magazine for the manga and its OVA adaptation, full of all these cute little behind-the-scenes write-ups and various activities. Alyssa and I had a lot of fun just combing through it, and I plan on going over it page by page as part of something I'll talk about more in a sec. One of the sections within this little treasure trove was an advertisement for a Sailor x Minna Agechao clothing line collab featuring a pair of panties. We can't see what's on the front, and the backside doesn't contain anything directly relevant to the series, but the boxers clearly do, so I'm willing to bet it's just obscured. I literally cheered when I saw these. They changed nothing about the information elsewhere in this video. They were never going to be packaged with the CPM release, but this puts me at cosmic ease. Before I made this earth-shattering discovery, though, I was assuaged by realizing how many pieces of media have been brought over here with novelty underwear. Take, for example, this DVD set of Najika Blitz Tactics from 2003. I haven't watched this anime. I didn't even know the damn thing existed until I learned about the panties that lay within this very keep case. So the marketing gimmick worked on me some 18 years late, except the fucking copy I bought on eBay did not come with them, despite the listing saying as much. When the wool was still over my eyes, I had a brief fantasy, upon seeing how cheap it was supposed to be to own Najika underwear, of becoming a novelty pack-in underwear collector, an archivist of sorts, before realizing this was the only one within my meager price range. Turns out, not even this one. It's tragic. 2009 saw the release of these frankly astonishing God panties with the Enderbox edition of Shuffled's 6th DVD. They are nearly impossible to find listings of, but I did find a blog post from Funimation detailing a customer who passed their pair off to a friend who works at a strip club. Anime wins, baby. Probably the most well-known by a long shot are the Catherine Love Is Over edition boxers. That special edition is still being sold brand new, albeit at full price, so if you want to ensure that your Catherine boxers haven't been pre-dookied in, that's one way. Not technically underwear, but arguably the most perverse by far was the Sorcery Saga Bib from 2013. Finally, in 2016 and 17 respectively, Galgun Double Piece and Panty Party would have deluxe editions boasting real panties. To my knowledge, we've seen a drought since then. Almost immediately upon news of Minna Agechao's cancellation, the Usenet posters joked about it becoming a famous lost anime, the first vapor anime. I reached out to one of Animego's co-founders myself, and he graciously confirmed that the subtitling script command file still exists and is safely in his possession, but that he's not at liberty to do anything with it given the rights limbo it sits in. Anime News Network's Mike Toole suspects the chain of acquisitions has landed Mina Agechao in the hands of Aniplex, but I can't say I expect a restoration of this thing to be even remotely a priority. Something I can't help but think about is the incredibly slim possibility that any given VHS out there that may look completely normal on the outside may just contain the English sub. The world of anime in the VHS era is so big and vast, so rich with big budget and indie productions, with history spanning the entire globe, reaching far past Japan and the English-speaking territories in the West, that the controversy of Mina Agechao is ultimately no more than a footnote in its grand tapestry. I'm far from done discussing this era, so stay tuned for next time. Also, I'm planning on making a whole separate video in addition to this for my second channel, going over that magazine, some miscellaneous details I would have even further risked demonetization for talking about here, and any corrections that may prove necessary in the video's aftermath. In addition, within this same video, I'm trying something new out via Patreon, where I'll be doing Q&As on each video after their release. If you'd like to hear any more of my thoughts on any aspects of this video and the stories therein, this is the place to ask. More details over there, but there you go. To clarify once more, these videos will still be available to everyone, so if you want to ask something particular or you want to support the weird things I do, links in the description. Thanks.